This episode of Let's Talk Natural Medicine is brought to you by BioGland MedLab, proud platinum partners of ATMS. Built on 50 plus years of healthcare experience and nutritional science, BioGland MedLab delivers practitioner-only formulas, trusted by practitioners, loved by families. Welcome back to Let's Talk Natural Medicine, brought to you by the Australian Traditional Medicine Society. I'm your host, Natalie Hume, and today we're diving into a topic that many women experience, but few feel fully prepared for, and that is perimenopause. Did you know that perimenopause can begin as a woman's late 30s, but usually in the 40s, and it does last until menopause. During this time, natural therapies can play a key role in helping to ease symptoms and make sure you're prepared for the transition ahead. And joining us today on our episode is Sue Stevens, who is a naturopath, nutritionist, and counsellor. And Sue's going to help us explore how natural approaches can make the transition smoother. Thank you for joining us today, Sue.
No worries. Lovely to be here. Thanks, Nat.
And this is a huge topic. I feel like at the moment there's just so much about perimenopause and menopause, probably more perimenopause, right? So Let's start with, can you explain what is perimenopause? What are some symptoms that women experience during this phase as well?
Yeah, it seems to be a conversation that we're having now, which I love. I think the more the merrier. I think that's a great place to start. So, perimenopause is the time leading up to menopause, which is, we look at menopause having not had a period for the last year. So we kind of look at it retrospectively. So, but the 7 to 10 years potentially before, and it can be longer for some women. And as you said, it can start in the 30s and traditionally more in the 40s. We're speaking now to Gen X, millennials, people born before 1984. Don't want to frighten anyone. It can be earlier in smokers perhaps, and people with maybe bowel conditions or inflammation in the abdomen, or anyone who's had bowel operations. So things can change the onset, but it's generally genetics. So asking mum, grandma, aunts, sisters, what happened for them could be a clue. And what it really is a recalibration of the hormones. So as our egg reserves, I hate using these words, dwindle, in the ovaries, it's kind of our reproductive years are ending, and so the hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone will change accordingly. And it's through this particular lead up to menopause that the hormones can actually do a pretty sometimes volatile dance, and a lot of us as clinicians don't generally want to test through menopause hormones because we just, it could be different on different days, and we kind of look at it and go, okay, we just need to, as a naturopath, I just need to stabilize these hormones and stop that volatility that can lead to the symptoms. And predominantly the symptoms, fatigue is one of the big ones, and I think, can come from sleep. Lack of sleep, and that can certainly be changed due to the decreasing progesterone. Weight gain, I see a lot of women, we kind of almost, estrogen and insulin have a love affair together, and so as the estrogen declines, we even go insulin resistant around perimenopause and menopause. So I hear a lot of women saying, I eat the same, I'm exercising the same, and I'm putting on weight. What's going on? Hot flashes are traditionally what's thought of, and that can happen, but it's generally, and the other thing I see commonly is the changes in blood markers. So particularly cholesterol, maybe some inflammatory markers, blood glucose markers, they can start going elevating, and again, women are not doing anything particularly different. So it's quite confusing for them about how to get a handle on some of these things.
And so I guess a bit more about these hormones. So you touched on like estrogen, progesterone. What's exactly happening? Our estrogen's reducing, progesterone, and I want to also bring in this hormone cortisol as well, because I do know that maybe many women in that period leading up to perimenopause, if they're highly stressed, if they're burnt out or fatigued, they could probably be experiencing the symptoms a lot worse. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. And, I think it's one of those things that we don't realize estrogen and progesterone, they have so many other roles in the body. And it's not just, ovulation and potentially pregnancies. So what will happen is as I mentioned already, the ovaries will have a certain finite amount of eggs, and traditionally getting into the 40s, the eggs are reducing and we're not ovulating every month as a result. And the brain is kind of testing the water and testing the blood and going, oh, the estrogen's dropping. Oh, my goodness. And I'll send out another signal to say, come on, ovaries, work harder. And so we're getting these signals from the brain and the ovaries, to produce more eggs, and the ovaries are going, nah, I'm done. I'm over this. I don't think I'll do this anymore. But the brain keeps hammering and keeps sending these messages out. And so that's where you kind of get this volatility of these hormones. As I said, it can change, radically. And for some women, it can be such a roller coaster. And as a result, the estrogen particularly, and the progesterone changing those levels, and you add stress into the mix, where once upon a time you might have been able to handle a busy life, family, friends, work, all of the above, maybe study included, throw anything in there. You were busy, but you handled it. And now with these transition of these hormones and the decreasing amount of them, and the stress is still there and potentially even elevating because you're not sleeping so well, you're not coping as well as you might. Now we're starting to really get in there and women come in saying, I think I'm losing my mind. I've got brain fog. I can't think. I can't sleep. I'm just not coping. And we put it down to, okay, they're stressed and they've got, maybe relationship issues that maybe they can work on. But ultimately it is the dance that these hormones are all doing together that's really starting to drive some of the symptoms.
And I want to touch on one symptom that you did speak of before, and that's that weight gain. And particularly, I just want to say, I've heard a lot of term of this menobelly. Menobelly is definitely something that a lot of people are experiencing through perimenopause. So, and I know that's a really tough one, isn't it? And I know we're going to go through some lifestyle stuff in a minute, but can you explain exactly that insulin menobelly? What's going on?
Yeah, well, as a result, and this really shows up in women who perhaps haven't been, eating as well as they could and should, perhaps getting away with, having a higher carb diet, maybe, and I fully recognize I'm the fun police, maybe drinking a little bit more than is good for them. And around perimenopause, it's a really bad idea to take up a drinking career, because we've not only got just added calories, let's face it, in the alcohol, and quite a bit carbohydrate, but that will also change our sleep architecture, which almost guarantees that we don't have a good night's sleep. And I think if the one thing anyone can do is sleep, I'm getting to lifestyle, I know. But yeah, it's one of those things that I think we just need to pull back and really do the diet and the lifestyle well to see if we can support women through this transition. It is, as I mentioned, it's a recalibration, just as it was when we were starting to menstruate way back, whenever. It's again, our hormones and our body are getting used to having less of these hormones, and the estrogen and, as I mentioned, the insulin just have this love affair. So as the estrogen decreases, our body becomes less sensitive to the insulin, and as a result, the food that we're eating, we're storing at a higher rate just sitting still. And as the people, women may not have been eating anything differently. They're doing the same thing, but because their body's less interested in the insulin, they're storing it more as body fat. And the cortisol as well, with the stress hormones, will really put the weight around the belly area. So we've got a kind of almost like this perfect storm for some women. It can be really hard.
Yeah, okay. So let's now deep dive into some lifestyle tips. What are your best suggestions for someone who's heading into perimenopause or in the thick of perimenopause? What can we do?
Well, two things, diet and sleep. So I'll start with diet because I'm me and I'm a nutritionist and that's what we do. So, really simple, the P words, plants and protein. So protein, the size and thickness of the palm of your hand, 3 times a day, or maybe, half a palm of snacks. We really need adequate protein there to stabilize blood glucose and also to support muscle mass, which will decline in and of itself by 10% every decade. So we actively need to do something to protect our body composition and also our bones, which is a longer lens to take perhaps, but certainly something to be aware of. And certainly plants. I've never, ever had someone that I've had to say, geez, I think you better cut back on the veg. You're having to back away from you've got too much there. I think, as many colourful vegetables as possible, salads, sometimes in winter it's hard to get the salad in, but vegetables, hide them in soups, hide them in casseroles, put them in spaghetti, whatever you can to, get the vegetable resistance, I often call it, and I've got handouts on that to sort of, these are easy ways of getting more veg into you. So protein, plants, movement I would suggest also for the body composition, and this is where, safe movement. I really often send people to exercise physiologists and make sure that they're getting an understanding of what their body actually needs, and certainly weight-bearing activities, the weight resistance, Pilates, yoga, that sort of thing. I try and avoid the boot camps and maybe the high intensity things that can be helpful if someone's really fit and used to that kind of thing. But to start in on that, I find often leads to some injuries for women, and then I've got catch up. They actually then aren't exercising for a while until they're recovering. And then the sleep hygiene is absolutely key. So anything you can do to protect your sleep-wake cycle, getting up in the morning, bright light first thing can often really help reset that melatonin level. Stabilizing the blood glucose all day with great protein and plants, as I mentioned, and then having the wind down at night and getting off the phones. Blue screens are not going to be helpful, blocking that melatonin production. And so we really want maybe breath work, some listening to some great calming music. I'm interested in the brain flossing. If you haven't come across that, maybe go into Spotify and put in brain flossing. Some music to really help calm those binaural beats, to calm that nervous system down. Some breath work, anything to, reduce that stress from the day and get us into a good place to go to sleep and actually go through the 4 stages of deep sleep and repair our body and wake up ready to go the next day.
Brain flossing, I have not heard of it, but I will be looking at it after this. Absolutely. I love my relaxing music and calming meditation, walking barefoot on the grass. I mean,
Yes.
Getting outside in nature, that's just one of the key things, isn't it?
Always, yeah.
Yes. And do you find also maybe a sense of community is really important there? I mean, it's important at every stage, but you being the counsellor as well, helping that stress and anxiety through this time.
Yeah. And I think, Nat, it's such a great point you raised, and it is also about knowing that you're not alone. That you're not losing your mind. It is not crazy. There is a way through this, and to find your tribe. I often talk to patients about, you need a cheer squad. You need, I'm happy to be. We might need the physio. We might need Pilates instructor. We've got, we just go and find the people, and it could be that you've got some friends that you want to hang out with that are like-minded, that can also, turn up with you to these things, and so that you are in community. It's super important. And you mentioned nature. That's a regenerative place for me, and I think it is for most people. So whether that's a community garden or just, getting a pot plant or, spending time in nature, we know the evidence actually says that forest bathing is actually a thing. It can really help reset our nervous system. So time in nature is really important.
Yeah, and maybe getting together with your friends and community, but without the alcohol.
Yeah. So go to painting classes, or come, go somewhere that you can manage to do something, without alcohol.
Go for a bushwalk.
Yeah, bushwalk, absolutely. Book clubs, whatever. They might sound a bit naff, but that's absolutely the best thing.
Yes. And so let's talk a bit about as well any top nutrients or herbs that you'd be looking at this time in that transition.
Yeah. So, I didn't touch on vaginal dryness, but that can also be as a result of the decreasing estrogen. Our mucous membranes can change in composition, and so that can lead to, sometimes painful sex and things. So that one of the nutrients that can be really helpful is sea buckthorn oil. It's actually harvested in Nepal, which I have a connection to, so I know a little bit more about that. But it can really help with that mucous membrane and that vaginal health. Magnesium, I think it'd have to be the top one. M for menopause, M for magnesium. We need it in 300 pathways in the body. It just is enormously helpful, particularly for the nervous system and for the cardiovascular system, which again is another system of the body that can start to become a problem as our estrogen decreases. So, making sure that you've got adequate magnesium, around 350 milligrams a day, which, you can get from food, definitely nuts, seeds, green leafy things, but it also might be something to consider in terms of supplementation. Herbs, there are many of them, depending on, for me, it depends on what the patient comes in with, what fire we need to put out first. It's often nervous system, and so the nervines from the herbs are really, really important, and also the adaptogens. So we've got some great nervines, some ziziphus and some, passion flower in particular for, that heightened anxiety. You can also get them in teas, which can be quite nice. And some of the adaptogenic herbs, particularly Romania, I really love that one. It can be super helpful. I always think of Romania as kind of, the hole in the bucket. So we kind of need to plug the hole, because if we keep putting good things in, we've got a hole in the bucket, we keep leaking it out anyway. So, there are some really lovely herbs and nutrients, but I'll just put a tag in there because I think it's really important if you're on any medications, or if there's just turning up in a health food store and buying a whole lot of things can lead to interactions with certain medications, and it's absolutely important that you go to a registered, trained professional to actually understand what kind of magnesium you need. So there are many different forms of magnesium, what dose you need. And as I said, absolutely with the herbs and even some of the nutrients, we need to make sure that we're not interacting with things and actually causing a bigger problem or changing the way the medications work. So do make sure that you check out with a professional before you start taking herbs and medications.
I actually also wanted to chat to you about, or ask you about, collagen, because I know that this is a big thing with maybe women in this age group. Is that something that you see that's also, obviously I know we're reducing collagen at a rapid rate, quite from our 20s, I think, isn't it, or something?
Yeah, I know. It's a bit depressing, isn't it? But yeah, absolutely. So collagen is not a total protein. It's missing one of the amino acids, tryptophan, but it is really helpful in particular types of collagen. There are 3 of them to actually help with the joints and the ligaments, which, again, estrogen has a love affair with them as well, and all the connective tissue in our body. So not only we need the weight-bearing activity, great, to kind of strengthen them, but we also need to give them the nutrients to be able to make some of the ligaments and help with that stability. And collagen can come in there. And also, I think a lot of women take supplements for hair, skin and nails because the hair can thin, the nails can go brittle. And again, the collagen can be really helpful in that as well. So yes, I often use collagen for people who come to see me. And I just wanted to also do a shout out to phytoestrogens in food.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so that can be really helpful. Perimenopause and menopause, it can act as an estrogen mimicker. So if we've got excessive amounts, perimenopausally, or if we've got less postmenopausally, it can actually help with, stabilizing that. And there's great foods that we can have, a lot of soy products, edamame, miso, tofu, tempeh, that sort of thing, and also some, flax seeds, other legumes and so on. So there's lots of foods that we can eat that can also really help with this transition.
Okay, so, amazing. Yep. And I just want to quickly ask you a little fact or fiction. Perimenopause is just like menopause, but only longer. Is that true?
Yeah, look, I think what I will say is there's early, middle and late stage perimenopause as well as early, middle and late stage menopause. So, and it depends, as I said, on the genetics, it depends on the lifestyle as to how significant that transition through both of those periods is for somebody. And so it might be that you have a relatively short perimenopause lead up, it's not a huge transition. It's not a really upsetting, transition for women. And then, going into menopause, again, hopefully it can be subtle and we do have other considerations, as I mentioned, the heart health and the bone health in particular. But yeah, it should be an easy, and it can be an easy transition. I think a lot of women are worried about perimenopause and particularly menopause for many different reasons. I think there are some horror stories out there. And I think there's also a certain amount of grief around this transition too. Even if women have children or if they haven't had children, it can be, and the aging female, particularly the way it's portrayed in the media, can have a huge impact here. But I think, leading maybe on a positive note is I think menopause is a superpower. And it certainly can be, there's a lot of great stuff on the other side. So I think, get set, get a healthy BMI, get a healthy weight, really look at the diet, consult a professional if you're concerned about anything. Don't suffer, don't be on your own. Reach out, there is help. We're here to guide you through lots and lots of nutrients, loads of foods, and certainly herbal medicine can, really make this transition something that is not terrifying. And getting into menopause, it's great. So, jump in water.
It's the superpower. It's our superpower. So
absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise today, Sue. It's lovely to have you on our show.
No, it was great to be here. Thanks, Nat.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning into this episode of Let's Talk Natural Medicine. To find a qualified practitioner, please visit atms.com.au and click to find a practitioner. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up to our newsletter, Friends of Natural Medicine, for more wellness tips, natural medicines, and healthy recipes. So let's wrap up with some quick wins for perimenopause. focused on a nutrient-rich diet, include mindfulness, forest bathing, breathing to reduce stress, and stay active with regular movement. Until next time, take care and stay naturally well. Join us again by following us for more uplifting discussions on natural medicine and holistic well-being. And if today left you inspired, share the love with a 5-star review. It helps others on their wellness journey find us too.